Bookworms and bakers, cooks and cookbook lovers, welcome back to the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. I'm your host, Dean Jones. This week, admittedly, I'm a bit starstruck. Today's guest has graced our TV screens for years, and let me tell you, they're just as amazing in person. Joining us is the phenomenal Amy Bruni, world-famous paranormal investigator, best-selling author, podcaster, and TV host. Remember Ghost Hunters, that long-running paranormal show? Amy was there in 2007 and she hasn't stopped since. Now, she co-hosts and executive produces the travel channel's Kindred Spirits and chills us out with her true crime podcast, Haunted Road. But Amy just doesn't talk about the paranormal, she experiences it. She's the owner of Strange Escapes, leading expeditions to America's spookiest locations. And if you're hungry for more, she's also the author of her new cookbook, Food to Die For, which we'll be talking about today, as well as her previous book, Life with the Afterlife. Amy brings her talents all the way from Newport, Rhode Island. Are you ready to dive into the unknown with the wonderful Amy Bruni? Let's get this conversation started. Welcome to the Well Seasoned Librarian Podcast. I'm your host, Dean Jones. I'm very excited to have on our program somebody who I've seen on TV countless times, and I'm so thrilled to be talking to them. We're talking today to paranormal investigator, TV personality, you know her from Ghost Hunters and Kindred Spirits and more. She has a new cookbook out called Food to Die For, Recipes and Stories from America's Most Legendary Haunted Places, available for purchase July 30th, and you can pre-purchase it now. We'll have links in the bio. So we're talking to, undoubtedly, Amy Bruni. Amy, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I am just so thrilled to be talking to you. I became acquainted with your shows with my ex. She introduced me to Ghost Hunters and also to Kindred Spirits. We watched, I think, every episode multiple times. We've seen you on TV, I think, more than any other personality. I'm so happy to have you on the podcast. I'm also very gobsmacked, so I'm trying not to stumble over my words or anything. Thank you.
Oh, you're awesome. No worries at all. Thank you.
I want to ask, I looking at your bio, and I was interested. You spent a decade in the health insurance industry before becoming a paranormal investigator. What made you decide to pursue this career change?
Yeah, it kind of came to me. So I was working as in project management for health insurance for many years, and I was also a paranormal investigator and researcher, but that was something that I did kind of in my spare time, on weekends, after work, that kind of thing. And then I met the guys from Ghost Hunters, and they wanted, I had been working on a paranormal podcast at the time. I had been producing it. So they asked me to assist them with their podcast. And so we just became friends over a couple of years while I was working on their podcast. So I was living in California at the time. And so when they came out to California to film, they asked if I wanted to guest on a couple cases because they were really big and they needed an extra set of hands. And I was like, sure. And so I went out. I think the first one I did was Clovis Sanitarium near Fresno, or in Clovis. And then I did the USS Hornet. And then after that, the producers called and they were like, so do you want to do this all the time? And then next thing you know, I'm on the road with that team. I was on the road for 7 years with Ghost Hunters, some years traveling 300 days out of the year. So it was quite an experience.
So you did a lot of traveling. Can you elaborate on the research into the group dynamics of ghost hunting teams? Have you traveled to haunted locations across the country, impacted your approach to investigations?
Yeah, so before I was on TV, I was really interested in how reality television was affecting paranormal teams across the country and the world. Because when Ghost Hunters came out in 2004, there were a lot of people who were pursuing the paranormal. Like I was into the paranormal, but then once that show took off, suddenly there were teams everywhere. And so I just started doing a lot of surveying of teams, trying to figure out like what their motivations were. Like, was this having a positive impact on the paranormal field in general, getting all these new people interested? And so that was what I was doing with that. But then, as far as researching haunted locations and everything, I already was a pretty in-depth researcher because I was producing podcasts and, I was an analyst. And so my job was to research. And so it really, once I was on Ghost Hunters, I got to put those skills to the test. And over the years, I just really developed this skill set of historical research that I love. Still, I research constantly, so it's kind of it's a passion. It's a little bit of an addiction, and so, but yeah, it's been. I don't know that I would have opened up that door for me quite so much if I hadn't been put in that role on the show by chance. So it was great.
Reading, we're going to circle back to the cookbook in a bit, but reading the cookbook really made me think how much you seem to love the history of the places that you investigate. Did that come naturally to you? Is that something you always had before, or is it something you developed over time?
So I talk to a lot of people about the historical aspect of ghost hunting because there's a lot of people out there, historians or people in in museums and whatnot and historical societies. They kind of sometimes are a little skeptical of the ghost audience.
Yeah.
But I always tell them, I'm like, listen, ghosts and history go hand in hand. So even if you don't believe in ghosts, you do have this huge group of people who are obsessed with getting the history right and the places that they are investigating and exploring. And so that really, like, the history to me is just so fascinating. And I always want to get it right because in my viewpoint, if I'm speaking to ghosts or trying to correspond with ghosts, I want to know who I'm talking to and I want to have the correct information. So yeah, I'm very passionate about history and getting history correct because what I do also entails a lot of legends and lore. And sometimes we have to kind of sift through that and get to the actual history to make sense of it.
I've seen you in some places where you stayed overnight in places where I'm like, I think I'm fairly brave in this regard, but there's no way in hell I would stay in some of those places overnight where you guys have done because it's terrifying just to imagine it. What is the scariest place you ever stayed in, if you can even quantify that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I don't scare very easily. And honestly, when I'm staying over in a location, like usually we would stay, or I do stay in places that are haunted, like haunted rooms and stuff, just to see if I experience any of the activity people report. But I'm so exhausted usually by the time I go to sleep in some of these places and I
Oh
just
yeah.
fall asleep. Like there was one time we were investigating in New Orleans at the US Mint of all places.
Hmm.
It's 3 in the morning and I just fell asleep on the concrete floor. I was that exhausted. So,
Oh my God.
so sometimes I'm too exhausted to be scared of anything, I think. But I mean, I have had the reality is living people are much more scary than dead people to me. And
Yeah,
so
it's true.
I've had some experiences and run-ins with, people breaking into locations I've been investigating, or
Oh my God.
there's been some family members that have been a little questionable. And so that scares me a lot more than any of the dead folks I've met so far.
That's a really good point. Oh, can we talk a little bit about your travel company, Strange Escapes? That really sounded thrilling to me, and I was really excited to find out about this in my research about you.
Yeah, so I run a travel business called Strange Escapes, and what we do is we pair together haunted locations and vacations. So basically, it's an excuse for me to like pair together some of my favorite things, which is ghosts, travel. And a bunch of other weird people like me. We can all get together. And so we go to places like the Queen Mary or the Stanley Hotel or the Mount Washington Resort in New Hampshire. Or we have a cruise coming up in September where we're all cruising New England together and stopping at haunted places in every port. And so it's been a lot of fun and people really like we have a lot of return guests. We call them our escapees that come to each and every one of them. So it's a lot of fun.
I wanted to ask you about the book, Food to Die For, your cookbook that's going to be coming out on July 30th. Now, the full title is Food to Die For, Recipes and Stories from America's Most Legendary Haunted Places. And I was really thrilled to get a chance to read this ahead of time and delve into it because it's got a little bit of everything for everybody. If you're a paranormal expert, it's going to be fun for you. If you're a foodie, it's going to be fun for you. And you put recipes out that kind of tied into the location, which I thought was really thrilling. Can we talk about how you were inspired to create this and what made you think you wanted to write the cookbook, and how did you kind of pitch it to the publishing company?
Yeah, so it was funny. It really started because I saw this recipe. The Fall River Historical Society posted on their Facebook page actual picture of Lizzie Borden's recipe card for her meatloaf.
Yes.
And I saw that and I went, well, first of all, it sounded horrible. The recipe was, I was looking at that recipe and I was like, oh my gosh, like, but she loved it and it was like Lizzie's meatloaf, and so, and I went, what other places out there have recipes associated with them? And I also thought, like, anytime I think of cooking, I think of being transported in time. How many of us connect to loved ones who have passed by making a special recipe that was their specialty, and you taste that and you smell that and you instantly think of them. And so in my mind, I was thinking, gosh, like the more of these recipes we make, like you're actually experiencing something historical. And it's not just looking at a photo. It's not just it's not just looking at an artifact or something or touring a museum. You're like eating and smelling and tasting exactly what someone did in that place. And so I just thought it was a really cool way to step back in time a little bit, and experience some of these places that not everyone gets to go to, because they're all over the place. And then also, like, frankly, it was an excuse for me to combine two of my favorite things, which is cooking and ghosts. And so I thought, and so yeah, when I pitched it, it was so funny because I pitched it to my manager first. I'm like, I have this idea. And he's like, that is a great idea. And I was like, I think so. And so then my dear friend Julie, who is a contributor to this book, she's done a number of cookbooks. And so she and I got our heads together and we wrote the first chapter and put together a recipe list. And honestly, I feel like it was a pretty easy sell. It was just so unique. I think I was just meant to do it. I'm hoping to do more, honestly.
Oh yeah. I mean, because it really, it's exciting because I want to make sure that the audience understands it's not just recipes. You kind of break down recipes tied with specific locations. How did you choose the specific locations that are featured in the book? Because you've been to many places. How did you kind of pare down a list for a cookbook sized amount of places?
Well, so I had some right off the bat that I knew I wanted to include. Things like bread with the Jenny Wade house, because Jenny Wade in Gettysburg, she was shot while baking bread. There were just certain things where I was like, I have to do, the Grand Hotel in Mackinac Island. Like I've been there a number of times and they have these amazing pecan balls. And I'm like, I need to make those, And so I knew some right off the bat. And then I also just kind of looked at a US map and I wanted to make sure most every region was represented in some way. And so I went through and I started researching areas that I didn't feel were super covered in the book and made sure I found haunted locations there and then, found great recipes associated with them. And so it was kind of a process, but thankfully I've done so much research on these locations already because I've investigated many of them or I've covered them on my own podcast that I had a lot of notes and source material ready. And so, yeah, each recipe comes with pages of history and ghost stories. I even recorded an audio companion to it so that people can listen to the stories and history while they're cooking if they want. So yeah, it was a lot of work, but man, it is something else.
The look of the book is really, I'm a big book nerd, so I love cookbooks and I love when artistry is put into making them. And I feel like this is something that's becoming more recent. Companies are really spending a lot of time with good design. And the design in yours is exceptional. How much input did you have over the design in the cookbook?
When I met with the design team, I had kind of a vision board, like of what I wanted it to look like. I wanted it to look like kind of witchy and colonial and but dark and spooky, and to say that they nailed it is an understatement. They were sending me the photos every day, the dailies, like as they were, because they shot this over 5 days in Tennessee. And so every day they'd send me a link of what they shot that day. And there were so many times where I was just literally crying at how beautiful the photography is. Like, I was just like, I can't believe this. Like, I'd made most all of these recipes and seen them already in person, but then just the artistry, the photographer, the food stylist, all of they just, it is stunning. I would frame these and put them on my wall, some of these images.
Yeah, that's no exaggeration. I mean, for the listeners, this really is an exemplary cookbook all the way through from the beginning to the end. Gorgeous, just the design work page by page is very detailed and very perfect. I really have to hand it to the design team that worked on that. Talking about the food a little bit, I always like to try before I talk to somebody at least one recipe out of it. So I tried the
Yeah.
Puritan pudding, which I quite loved and would make again. Do you have any standouts from this that you tried that you ended up, liking and like would make again?
I love that you made the Puritan pudding because I think that might be the oldest recipe in the book. It dates back to the 1600s, like so it's
It's
like
good. It's very good.
yeah, yeah. So there's a few for me. I really love the Myrtle's croissant bread pudding. It's completely sinful,
Mm, yeah.
but it is so good. It is their specialty. When they gave me that recipe, I was like, oh my gosh, they're sharing this with me? Okay. Um, I really enjoy, strangely enough, I love the peanut soup from the Farnsworth House in Gettysburg.
Yeah, goober pea soup. Yeah.
Yeah, the goober pea soup. We have put that in rotation in the house now. Like I've had that multiple times over the years there. Um, but then I made it at home and I was just like, we just love that. Like I'll make a salad and like have some crunchy bread with it, and it's like the perfect meal for us. I also the oddly enough, the vegetable soup from Waverly Hills Sanatorium is really good. I was like, and it's very healthy. And so I've made that, and I even froze it a few times. Like it makes such a big amount that I like have frozen it and reheated it later. So and I love the Caesar salad from Sheboygan Asylum too. I'm a big Caesar salad fan, and that one is like delicious. So you would be surprised. There's a lot that I can't name them all, but it's funny, there's this mix of things that are definitely historic, mainly Lizzie Borden's meatloaf, which
Yeah. I was tickled to see that. I like that.
you can try it if you want, but but then there's also some that are just genuinely really great recipes. So
I loved the Blue Lady homage in the martini that you included for the Moss Beach Distillery. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
yeah, I felt like so with the Moss Beach Distillery, I kind of felt bad because they were featured on Ghost Hunters years and years ago. It was right before I started there,
Uh-huh.
and and they found a lot because they kind of played up their hauntings quite a bit, and they had some like mechanics and they like mechanical things, and so kind of came off on the show as though they were like playing with like that they were kind of tricking people, but I feel like they just kind of that they're actually very, very haunted, but they
Yeah.
just really leaned into it, and it brought in guests. And so I do love the story there. And so that's why it was kind of important to me to feature them, in a light where people could see that it is genuinely haunted.
Oh yeah. No, absolutely. I've been there. It's really a neat place, but you really get the sense. I've never seen anything there, but my ex did, and I really get the feeling that the place is definitely. You really get the impression when you
Oh
visit.
yeah, definitely.
Was there any? You did a lot of historical recipes. Did you have any challenges adapting them for a modern kitchen?
Definitely. I'm actually looking right now because there's one, it was like a seafood stew, and of course the name is escaping me right now. It was from let me see here.
That sounds
Horrifying.
familiar. I think I know what
Yeah,
you're
it
talking about.
was, I just looked it up right before this too. Oh, okay. It was from the Herman Grima House in New Orleans. It's the crab soup is what it is. And so
Yeah.
that was adapted from a book that it was a book called Creole Cookery that was published in 1885.
Oh wow.
And it was literally like, I wish I had it in front of me so I could tell you, but it was like, fetch 24 crabs. And then it was like this, it was very, there was absolutely no punctuation. It was all like, it was a lot. And, and it had the instructions on how to make the seafood broth by boiling all of like the innards of the and stuff. And so we adapted that one a little bit but it took a few tries. Like the first and it was like a very expensive recipe to keep testing because I was like, I keep buying these crabs. And so, but the end result is great.
Do you have any tips for the readers who are interested in exploring the paranormal side of the locations that you feature in the book?
Yeah, I mean, the wonderful thing about this is a lot of these places are open to the public, and a lot of them embrace their hauntings. And so, if there's one near you you want to try out, by all means, head in there and let them know you saw them in the book and ask them questions. Some of them might even offer public investigations where you can give it a try yourself. But yeah, a lot of these are open and very excited to welcome guests when it comes to the ghost. There's a couple in there that I don't know how excited they'll be when they see they're in the book, but we'll see what happens.
I know I always hate asking this question because, you're just having the book come out, but do you have any plans for a follow-up or sequel? Because I know that you've been to many locations that are interesting and have a lot of historical significance. Do you want to kind of do more of this in the future?
Absolutely. I would love to have follow-ups, either like, different types of cuisine, or maybe like a cocktails only, or like a desserts only, or maybe an international version. Like, there are so many places we could go with
Oh,
this, that I would be thrilled to do more, because it was on it, I'm always on the go, and I've worked in TV for so long. Like, these last couple years, I've really been able to kind of buckle down and work from home a lot more by doing the book and doing my podcast and running Strange Escapes. And it's been really great. And so anything that keeps me home, I have an 11-year-old daughter. And so anything that keeps me home, where I'm not filming constantly, is great. I mean, I'm still filming, like I just shot another documentary, but I was only gone for 10 days and I brought her with me. So, stuff like that. But yeah, I would love to do more.
are you going to do a book tour for the book?
I am. So I do a huge fall speaking tour every year. And so I know we're coordinating with a lot of like local bookstores, to kind of work hand in hand with a lot of those talks. And then I am doing some other signings and things. They're still assembling all of that. But yeah, I will be on the road with the book. It's nice because it comes out at the end of July, but I think it's really going to branch into spooky season too. I think
Nice.
September, October, I think people are going to, and I think it's going to make a great Christmas gift for people. So it's got a shelf life.
No, yeah, I mean, I think it would be an excellent gift for anybody, birthday, Christmas, otherwise. I think anybody who's a foodie, anybody who likes the paranormal side of things is definitely going to be very interested.
Yeah, or
Actually,
even
even
just
just history
history.
buffs. Yeah,
Yeah, history, photography. I mean, it's covers all the bases.
the history part of it was very solid, and the photography, I loved. You really seem to have a very precise interest in the photos that you chose, and everything seemed very purposeful. I've seen a lot of cookbooks in the past where things are just thrown up and you're just like, it's random, but this was very purposeful. Did you kind of really kind of was it hard to kind of finish the book and kind of make sure everything was kind of in its place?
It's a lot of moving parts. I mean, we probably went through with edits. I can't even tell you how many times, because there was a number of us looking at it, looking for just making sure we got everything right. And the photography, obviously the stuff shot in studio, like picking the perfect images was hard because every image was perfect, it seemed like. And but then also we had to source a lot of photography for each location, and that kind of got to be a challenge. Thankfully, some of those photos I took myself, some of them are like my colleagues took. I was like, texting and emailing everybody. Do you have a picture of this place? Do you have something good of this place? And so it was just so many moving parts that, like, even when we sent it to press, or to print, I was like, I feel like I missed something. And so when I did the audio version, it was, there were a couple
Oh,
little things where,
audio version. That's
yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I figured I mean, they came to me and asked me if I'd be interested in that, because there's a storytelling element to it with the history and the ghost stories. And so they asked if I'd be willing to do that. And so I did. So I got to read through all of it. So I imagine people will cook and listen to me if so.
That's great. No, I'm a big audiobook fan, so that's going to be definitely a must for me. Amy, I want to thank you for being here on the podcast today. I want to mention again the book Food to Die For, Recipes and Stories from America's Most Legendary Haunted Places. It's going to be available July 30th of this year, and you can pre-purchase it online through Amazon if you like. There's going to be links in the bio. Amy, thanks for being on the podcast. I wish you all the success for the books, but I don't think you need it. It's going to be very well loved.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate it.
That's all for today's Brush with the Extraordinary with Amy Bruni. Don't forget to check out her work, Food to Die For, Recipes and Stories from America's Most Legendary Haunted Places, available July 30th. We will have links for pre-purchase in the show notes. Speaking of extraordinary, on Friday we're serving up helpings of something completely different. Joining us will be the brilliant minds behind the brand new cookbook library, Nice Nice Bite. They'll be dishing out the exciting new venture, a Las Vegas location for a soon-to-be national library chain. You won't want to miss it. Until then, I'll see you at the library.